How about them boys? Dez is back, and Dak continues to impress and overcome adversity. But for how long? Derek Carr and Amari Cooper lead the way to a big Raiders win and even bigger fantasy numbers. Plus, we check on our final results from our first ever Dopes rankings. How do you think we did, Cam?
I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know.
Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Dopes podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Parker, and sorry I was unable to join you last week. The father figure of the podcast is the one who's unable to join us tonight. He is expecting his second baby any minute and decided to take his kids out trick-or-treating. He should be back later this week with our Dope Rankings show, so try not to cry too much. In any case, lots to get to on our Week 8 recap show, but first I'd like to welcome in our new Dopes Rankings guru, Mr. John Fazio. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me, and glad to have you back here on our podcast.
I know, it's nice
been a
to
minute.
be back.
Yeah, hopefully you had some time to regroup and kind of regress and take this show on its way.
When you miss a week, it feels like months. Like I feel like I've been gone forever, just missing a week.
Yeah, you know what? It's true. Even like when we were, in our production meetings, writing and typing out this stuff, we kind of, have your own element, and that was kind of missing the last week. And like you said, it feels like it's been a month. So it's nice to have you back, and we gotta hopefully have all three of us on in the next one. But we'll see how Herbert and his kids are doing once Wednesday rolls around. So let's just get right to the recap. We'll take a shot for Herbert and be on our merry way here.
Yes, all depends on when the baby comes. And we start with the Sunday night game in Arlington, Texas. Dez is back, and Dak saved the day. John, did the Cowboys deserve to win this game?
That's a good question. Do they? No. To answer your question, they did not deserve to win this game, but they did win the game somehow. Dez came back in a big way, got that late touchdown in the fourth quarter. He had 14 targets on the day. I didn't realize he had that many targets, and he only caught 4 of them. But he had 113 yards. He had that big first catch in the first quarter. Kind of started this whole game up for the Cowboys. And he threw up the X, gave him the X to the crowd. Was excited to see that because I have him on one of my teams. But going to Dak Prescott, now it wasn't really his best game, especially coming out of the gate. The Eagles' defense kind of clamped down on him, especially in the first half. They really were struggling to find points on the board. And I guess that's what you were trying to allude to, but this guy kind of overcame adversity, scored late in the fourth quarter, took it to overtime. Eagles kind of collapsed on offense. Their receivers haven't really been living up to expectation pretty much since Jordan Matthews entered the team. I know he has had a couple of solid weeks, but for the most part, hasn't really been a great fantasy contributor throughout his career so far. And Dak just pretty much took his time on that first drive in overtime. I think they wasted about 8 or 9 minutes off the clock. And it ended with a touchdown pass to Jason Witten to end the game. So Jerry Jones was pretty excited up in his suite.
He
along
was
with his
very excited in that suite.
Yeah, especially with all of his minions sitting around him, giving him a pat on the back. But at the end of the day, they only have one loss so far this season. And they're going to try to continue to roll, especially against an 0-8 Browns team. So Jerry Jones did say after the game that Dak's still going to be their starter against those Browns. And it seems like Romo's still not healthy to start just yet. But I'll tell you one thing. I don't believe he's going to start unless Dak completely falls off or he gets injured. I don't care what the reports say out of Dallas or in Arlington, wherever they are. What Jerry Jones says, because all he does is blow smoke off people's asses, especially the media, and you can't really trust anything the coaches say. They're just trying to keep their job. So I don't know. What do you think about Dak? What do you think about Romo? Do you think that Romo has a chance to start, or do you think that this is Dak's team until he either collapses or gets injured?
It's so tough. It's so tough when you have a star quarterback like Romo, who's been on your team for so long. He's a family member to that team, and he gets injured again, time and time again. And it's seems like he just can't stay healthy. And as sad as it is, when you have a player that just can't stay healthy, sometimes you have to hang it up, whether you want to or not, whether it hurts you or hurts the team to do that to you. But the chemistry between Dak and the Cowboys, I mean, even if Romo was healthy the week after next, and say Dak blew it this week against the Browns and gave them their first win, I still don't think that's grounds for sitting him the week after if Romo's healthy. Like, I just don't see how you can break that up right now.
Yeah, actually, I'm in agreement with you. It's funny because whenever Herbert's on the podcast and you're not here, he usually disagrees with a lot of the stuff I say. So it's funny that right off the bat we agree with something. But no, seriously, I just feel like you said, Romo being injured, what are the chances that he becomes healthy the rest of the season and they continue into the playoffs? You got to assume they're going to be in the playoffs after this hot start they have. And, they roll into a Super Bowl. I mean, I think those odds are very slim, to be honest with you. And I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden Romo says, I got to retire because my body's just not capable of taking these hits anymore. I mean,
yep.
I feel like he's one big hit away from that actually happening. So, I mean, we'll see. It's going to be definitely an interesting thing to monitor, especially fantasy-wise moving forward. But I got to believe if you have Dak Prescott on your team, you got to keep him until you actually see him not on the field anymore. I wouldn't even believe reports, even if they said that he's going to get benched, because sooner or later I think he's going to be the X factor to them being the key recipe to win this season, just as a team, not even in fantasy.
And what you just said, I agree to. And that actually happened this year in another sport, in baseball. That happened to Mark Teixeira this year, whereas in the beginning of the season, he said he wanted to continue to play for years to come, but halfway through the season finally realized what everybody else kind of knew, which was it's time to hang it up because you just can't stay healthy. And I feel like Romo might be on that same path that Teixeira was on.
I was just going to say, that's actually a good call. That's good symmetry between two different sports. Yeah, pretty much the same mindset. Obviously, baseball's not as bad as a contact sport as football, but
sure,
the same concept for sure definitely applies in my opinion. So that's a good analogy there.
And on that note, since I'm bringing up baseball, we're going to move on to the early game in London between the Bengals and the Redskins, where there was yet another tie this year in the NFL, John.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, two ties in the same season is kind of rare, but actually the last time that it happened was back in 1997. And I saw online that I think it was ESPN that tweeted it out. They had brought up the fact that the last time that two ties happened in the season, which was 97, the Indians were in the World Series.
Oh,
and
my God.
if you're not a big baseball fan and you don't know what happened, the Indians were in the World Series and they lost in Florida Game 7 against the Marlins. So, I mean, they're up 3-2 right now. They're going back to Cleveland. I guess that's the one difference between that and 97. But if I saw that as an Indians fan, I'd just be thinking, oh, no. But getting back to football, I wonder if the British people were cool with a tie because they're so used to that in soccer, right?
Yes, they are.
So I just found it kind of ironic. It was the first time that there was ever a tie in London. I think it was the first time that there was an overtime period actually in London overall. So they said that on the broadcast. Yeah, they definitely said that on the broadcast. Now that I remember, Mr. Kenny Albert, one of the greatest guys out there on TV. But let's go to some of these players here. Jordan Reed came back from his concussion symptom, and he looked pretty much like his dominant, normal self. Had 9 catches for 99 yards, and he had a touchdown as well. But he wasn't the only tight end to get some love on the Redskins. Vernon Davis, remember him? Looks like he's back in shape. Did you catch any of this London game or not?
I did. I slept through the first half a little bit, but I woke up and I saw the second half.
Okay, yeah, it was tough for me. I was out all night Saturday, Halloween weekend.
Halloween parties.
Yeah, it was a lot of going on, a lot of action on Halloween. Did you dress up? I know we're kind of getting out of the way here.
I did dress up.
Who would you dress up as?
I was Pretty Woman.
From the movie?
The movie, Pretty. Yes.
How do you dress up as that? I'm curious.
I didn't make my own costume, but her in the beginning of the movie was my costume.
Interesting.
Yes.
Did anybody know that or not?
Yes, everybody knew.
Really?
I wore it a couple years ago. I wasn't sure if I was going to make Halloween party because of work this year. So I decided to just rewear an old costume from a few years ago. And I won a couple costume contests with that one.
So that must have been really impressive.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Who do you see dressed up as Pretty Woman?
I can't even, to be honest with you, I'm not a watcher of that movie. I don't think I've ever seen that movie.
Oh,
I've seen,
John.
I know what it's about, kind of, but I honestly don't really have an image of what she looks like, so.
It's time to sit down, have a glass of wine, and watch Pretty Woman, all right, John?
That sounds like a basic
No
night
football
to me.
for you this week. You're going to watch some Pretty Woman.
Fair enough. That's all. I'll leave it at that. I won't get into what I was. It was a video game character. Doesn't really matter. So
Try me.
Oh, try you? Okay. I was Vault Boy from Fallout 4.
Yeah,
It
nope.
was a video game that came out last year. I had a lot of older people come up to me and ask what I was. They were just fascinated by what I was wearing. And the people that knew what I was really loved it. Like they really went out of their way to give me a high five or just a comment saying how nice the costume was and all that stuff. So
See, me too. We went down two completely different paths.
yeah, not too many women knew, surprisingly.
Yeah, I get that.
But let's get back to football here. I kind of forgot to mention that in the beginning. I'm glad we brought it up now, though. But getting back to business, Vernon Davis. Let's get back to him. He looked like he was pretty much back to his normal 49ers self. I mean, he had 5 catches for 93 yards. And pretty much a lot of the fantasy world experts out there said that he wasn't really going to have a game, especially with Jordan Reed coming back. And look, he went out there and he kind of proved a point, saying, I still got some gas left in the tank. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they use him actually going forward. I know they have a bye coming up this week, but I've pretty much thought that Jamison Crowder, who had an excellent game, was going to pretty much handle the other main work after Deshaun Jackson went down with a shoulder injury. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough read on the Redskins offense. This week they put up a lot of points, put up a lot of yardage against the Bengals, and Crowder had over 107 yards with a touchdown. So it's going to be difficult to kind of project each guy going forward. But I just have a good grasp on Reed. He's going to be a number 1 guy in the tight end position to start. Jameson Crowder is a nice flex play as of right now. Deshaun Jackson, I'm a little worried about. I think he'd be more of a dice roll than anything else. Just have to see how bad that injury is. And with Vernon Davis, I would say I'd take my chances elsewhere. But, again, I think it's more along the lines of kind of seeing how their offense goes along as the time moves on.
And we'll see how Jackson's injury plays out after that bye week. And on the Bengals side, one of my pickups that I got to snag last week, Tyler Eifert, was back to his old self.
Yeah, he actually found the end zone for the first time this year, and he added 102 yards on 9 catches.
Woo-hoo.
He also had 11 targets, which is the most in his career thus far. So looks like they're actually going to use him to his 2015 self. And honestly, he is one of the elite tight ends to have, especially because he's so valuable in the red zone. He should have at least 6 or 7 touchdowns by the year's end. So if you got him in standard, I think he's a must start going forward.
Yeah, they didn't hold back using him at all, and Dalton likes him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they were really struggling in the red zone before he came into the lineup. And once he got back to his old self this past weekend, you saw that they were trying to get him the ball into the end zone. So it's great news for owners.
I've got a fun fact, actually, about Eifert. I picked him up in fantasy, and the guy I'm playing this week, he changes his team name every week against whoever he's playing and picks something to attack the person he's playing against, and he named his team Stinky Eifert. And Eifert was one of the best players on my team this week, so
I guess essentially bit him in the ass.
yes, it did.
Well, I never do anything. I never brag, because it can always come back to you.
Sure.
And that method has actually proven a bunch of championships. So that's a little bit of one of those superstitions, you can say. That's not my style of play. I leave my bragging after I win championships. Leave it at that. Also on the Bengals, got to mention Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard. They both found the end zone. And after the game, I don't know if you saw any like post news in Germany. I know everyone's tuned into the German news, but a reporter tried interviewing the kicker for the Redskins after he missed what would have been the game winner. Dustin Hopkins, who is the guy that I'm talking about. He was about to answer a question. He started answering a question from this German reporter when all of a sudden a PR person kind of just stopped in the middle of their conversation, pushed the reporter away, and told him no interviews. And like the German guy was just like, he just smiled. He was like, what the hell just happened? It was very odd. Did you see that?
I didn't see that. Was that like in the very beginning of the interview?
Yeah, so like I guess he just pulled Hopkins aside. He had no idea who he was. He just was like, all right, I'll just ask like a question or two and get the hell off the field. The PR guy that for the Redskins, he didn't want him to answer any questions from him. So
weird.
Yeah, he just like pushed him aside, and he was answering the question. He just didn't give a full answer. The PR guy kind of just interjected and just pushed him out of the way and told him to move on.
Well, at least it won't look bad on him.
No, it was just odd on the PR part. I don't know. They're very weird people to deal with, so very cutthroat. You just gotta push your way through them. But yeah, that game itself, let's just not speak of it again. It might bite them back in the end when they're fighting for a playoff chance, and that tie kind of blemishes their record, but that's for weeks to come. So,
well, not the only game like that this year either, though, with the miss of the field goals and overtime.
In Seahawks and Cardinals game, the worst game in history.
Next up, we could talk about an impressive fantasy day for Amari Cooper and Derek Carr, who came back to win against the Bucs in overtime. And there was a lot of overtime action on Sunday, John. And let's be quite honest, there could have been more than one tie this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it certainly looked like this game was heading to a tie, and I mean, two ties in a single, I guess, time period day would have been insane. But look, Amari Cooper and Derek Carr at the end of the day, they came into this game ready to rock and roll. Carr had the best quarterback day out of any other player in the league. I believe he had over 500 yards too. He had a quiet 500 yards. And he had 4 touchdown passes. So he actually set a team record for yards. Not only that, the team itself, I actually just remember this now. They set a record, an NFL record for the most penalties in a single game. They had 24 penalties. Wow. So for them to even actually win this game is a miracle on its own.
That's crazy.
Michael Crabtree also went off. This whole team went off. So, I mean, look, Carr has kind of been like an up and down guy, especially the last couple of weeks. But and going against Denver next weekend could be a little bit trouble. But with 4 teams on a bye this past week, if you had him and you had Cooper in your lineup, you were probably doing somersaults in your living room. I mean, he just went off. There's nothing else to say. But yeah, I mean, great games for Carr and Cooper and Crabtree. Those guys, especially Cooper and Crabtree, are pretty much obvious starts moving forward.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I've been playing Crabtree all season. He's been outstanding. I haven't even questioned benching him once.
Yeah, I think he's actually, I don't know if he leads the league in the most red zone targets, but he's, I think, top 2 for sure in that category. So again, opportunity like that, you can't pass up on a player like that, even if he doesn't find the end zone.
No, definitely not. And next up, we're going to go back in time a little bit to the Thursday night game, which seems like forever ago, where we had another snoozer between the Jags and the Titans. It is bad, John. The Jags are hard to watch right now.
And it's all due to the quarterback position. I mean, Blake Bortles is got to be the biggest mirage in all of NFL fantasy. He struggled so badly in the first half of that game. I looked at his points just because I was curious to see where he was at. In my league, he had about 2.5 points going into halftime. He just didn't look good at all. He was overthrowing passes. He was short throwing them. He was throwing them right to defenders. He somehow didn't throw a pick in this game, which was very surprising, especially because the Titans are a pretty good defense. They average, I think, about an interception per game, but it was just unbelievable considering how people on Twitter, obviously the trolls, but even some of the people in the media were looking to see if he was going to be benched. But they decided to keep him going, and he scored nearly 30 points to end the day here. It's just insane. I mean, Allen Hurns was saved by that. Both guys are just huge garbage time fantasy players. They live in the garbage cans. They're like Groucho. They're the Grouchos of fantasy football. I can't even fathom starting Bortles moving forward. I think he's a low-end quarterback 2. Desperate if you have a 2-quarterback league to start this guy. And they face the Chiefs in Kansas City next week, so who knows what's going to happen with that team.
Yeah, at this point, you give your backup a shot.
I mean, one positive is that he's actually bringing in a coach from the outside to try to work with him independently throughout the week. And it's all good news and all, but, I mean, there's just a lot of mechanics, a lot of problems wrong with Blake Bortles right now where you're even going to begin to question starting their star wide receiver, Allen Robinson.
Oh, no, we are over here. The owners of Allen Robinson, we are questioning that. I believe I actually did bench him one week.
It's so crazy because I actually thought that he was going to have a better year than most wide receivers, and that was one where I would have totally whiffed on. But again, a lot of the fantasy community kind of agreed, and
a lot of us did. He was a keeper. I kept him in my league.
You just got to blame Bortles. Like, it's not his fault. You saw Robinson when he was catching some balls, even when he was missed on some targets, he was just kind of shaking his head. Didn't look like he wanted to be on the field. He was just so embarrassed.
Right. I mean, if the targets aren't good to you, why bother being out there? I mean, it makes you look bad, and you know it's not necessarily your fault, but it's not fun. I mean, it's a complete opposite when we talk about the Cowboys and the team chemistry that they've got with Dak going on. I mean, the Blake Bortles situation could not be more opposite.
Certainly a problem. I'm avoiding until further notice. Bortles, hard to ignore Robinson. He might be more of a rolling the dice kind of guy, but we'll see what happens with those Jags. Stay tuned for more. On the opposite side of the field, though, DeMarco Murray is becoming a very interesting fantasy guy. He had a bit of a scare injuring his toe before halftime. He had to leave the game, and I believe he missed a series coming out of the third quarter. But he did come back in. He finished with over 100 yards, and they were pretty much leading that whole game, so they just took him out as a precaution. He did get an MRI on his toe once they did finish the game, and he should be fine for his next start in San Diego. They'll probably monitor his reps during practice this week. He won't probably see much of the practice field, but I feel like he'll be all systems go when they face the Chargers. Also, Kendall Wright looks like he's taking over that number 1 receiver role on that team. Delaney Walker is the big guy, the tight end. Mariota always looks to him, but he needs somebody else to throw to. And Tajay Sharp was supposed to be the guy. He had a pretty bad year so far. Doesn't look like he's going to get much involved anymore. Rashard Matthews had a couple of nice games, but he's not an impressive player. And then comes Kendall Wright coming off an injury, and he goes off for 84 yards and a touchdown with 4 catches. So looks like he might have a couple more good fantasy days ahead of him. Going to be tough to kind of gauge to see when he will do that, but it's interesting to see. He pretty much came out of nowhere, and now he's almost taking over the number 1 role in the offense.
And then we got the Packers and the Falcons, where we had a couple of surprising inactives before the game. A 1-point game, and as you predicted, John, this game had over 60 points scored.
Yeah, I said it would be like a 60-point game, and actually came out to a little over that, but you were kind of alluding to Randall Cobb and Ty Montgomery. Randall Cobb was a scratch, I believe, on Saturday, and that kind of confused owners a bit. But
it was late Saturday, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wake up early Sunday morning and I see that Ty Montgomery is also out, which was very surprising. He didn't even seem like he was on the injury report until that day, at least to my knowledge, and then it comes out that he had sickle cell trait, which is like the 3rd guy in the league to have it this year. It's surprising to me because I've never really heard of it until like a couple of years ago, and Now it seems like 3 guys in the NFL. It just seems like that's a lot for that specific disease, I guess you can call it. With those guys out, Davante Adams had a huge amount of catches. I think he had over 12. Jordy Nelson got a touchdown, so he was pretty much his normal self. Obvious start. I had a couple of guys on Twitter asking about if they should start Jordy Nelson. I'm just like, how do you not start him? He's the number one option in that offense, especially with 2 guys out in their receiving core.
I was just going to say that, especially with those 2 out, Jordy Nelson's going to get the majority of the targets.
I mean, I know like people like to chase points, but at the same time, you just can't bench some guys, and like Jordy Nelson's on a very short list of those guys. So if you played him, hopefully that guy played him. He got the touchdown. He got his points that he deserved. Davante Adams also had a great game, especially in PPR. And on the opposite side of the ball, we got Teron Ward, their backup, who had a nice game. I mean, I think he had over 40 yards, but he's strictly their backup. He wasn't heavily involved in the passing game much. He was just kind of keeping the pace going with the team. Nice comeback win for the Falcons. But if Tevin Coleman is still out, there's a good chance that Ward might see more carries. He might see more looks in the passing game. So stay tuned to our waiver wire segment. We might find Ward in this little segment we got rolling on. And then to roll out this game, we also had Mohamed Sanu. Had another nice game. He had a touchdown as well. I feel like he's a nice flex guy, especially with this week coming up, because there's 6 teams on a bye. And looking through some teams out there in some of my leagues, there's a team I saw that only has about 6 players that he has starting, and that's including his bench.
Wow.
So he's going to have to pick up a couple of guys. And you know what? Sanu might be out there.
6 teams on bye is tough.
It's very tough. And when you got the Patriots, you got the Redskins, that's a lot of fantasy playmakers. So you got to start digging, and you might have to start some of these guys in your flex. So I could see Sanu being a nice little flex play this week, especially against the Bucs on Thursday night. So might see a lot of points again in that game.
Yeah, John, I agree with you. And now that we've highlighted some of the games and talked about some players that had big fantasy days, we'll put a bow on our recap in accordance with our brand new Dopes ranking system. And if you haven't heard, this system is based off risk rather than player ability. We'll highlight some players in each group that had a memorable fantasy day, good or bad. And let's start off with the smoke 'em if you got 'em group. Will Fuller got a little banged up against the Lions on Sunday.
Yeah, not too many guys in this category. I looked over the list. All the guys that were in the list, with the exception of Fuller, had pretty good to great fantasy days. So they were good starts for you if you had him in. If you had Fuller, it was unfortunate. Look, I'm not even going to sugarcoat this. Osweiler is pure trash as a quarterback. I've said this last week. I'll say it again. Didn't deserve the money he got over the offseason. But Fuller had to leave the game with a leg injury. And with the bye coming up, hopefully that he heals up and he gets back to his normal self. But they seriously need to go sit down with this whole offensive group and kind of come up with some new plays, because their offense currently is not going anywhere. I do know the Texans did win that game against the Lions 20-13, but just, again, didn't look like Osweiler was a good quarterback at all. I would just, try to maybe avoid Fuller coming out of the bye just to see how healthy he is. He's going to be more of a dice roll than anything, but if you have Hopkins, you're pretty much in the same boat as Fuller. You don't know if you're going to have a great fantasy day or just a bad one. He's not been himself at all. And I thought, honestly, that he would have a similar year to last year, but not the case.
Yeah, I mean, a bye week for the Texans could not be coming at a better time. And next up is the Safe Bets group, where we can discuss a few more players from here. Let's discuss with Chris Thompson, the running back that I played this week, since we didn't mention him in the earlier portion of this game on the show.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have a great game in standard, but for PPR, he did, I guess, okay. He had like your typical average projected game, if you will. He wasn't used as much as the team said they were going to use him as. He was just kind of like a breather, change of pace back. Robert Kelly was actually the guy, the beneficiary, if you will, of this offense. So we'll briefly touch on him later on. Won't spoil where we will touch up on him, but I think if you have Thompson, You could still roll him out as a flex guy. He's kind of like a Sproles, but I wouldn't expect a nice game every week. I think he'll have like an average type of game moving forward, especially with Matt Jones injured if he's not around. Also mentioned Kobe Fleener and the rest of that Saints offense. Both Fleener and Snead kind of had mediocre days expected going against the Seahawks defense. Nothing really to note about. I mean, they were safe plays, but in the end, they weren't great starts. So, however, I want to get to the rookie Michael Thomas, who had yet another great game. And he actually earned some high praise from Drew Brees, saying that he wants to be more involved, and it's great to have him because he's doing everything in his power to be a great receiver. And he says that he thinks he's going to be an excellent receiver going forward in his career. So having such high remarks from one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league currently is certainly great news to fantasy owners, because now he's pretty much viewed as a nice wide receiver 3 or a top-notch flex spot if you got it.
Drew Brees has definitely been favoring him this year. I had Snead, and somebody actually dropped Thomas this past week, and I did a little tradesy.
Wow, that's a terrible drop from that owner. An excellent call on your part. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
You got the goods here. You got the goods. Let's talk about a guy that you kind of dislike.
Well, now we like him again.
Oh, Julian. I know you like to say Julian Edelman. I don't know if that's if you caught that, but Julian Edelman found the end zone for the first time this year. I bet you were psyched.
Hallelujah.
Now, Chris Hogan, their other wide receiver, did lead the team in receiving yards. He had 91. But I think it was more because Brady wanted him to do well against his former team. He used to be on the Bills 4 years, actually, and he wasn't really a factor at all. And getting the ball to him in Buffalo seemed to be like a big FU to the crowd. So I wouldn't look too much into that production. I would think Edelman is going to be the better beneficiary of that receiving core moving forward, like I've usually been saying the last couple of weeks. I think if you have Edelman, it's a nice, safe play. And let's not mention the big guy, Gronk. Got his 69th career touchdown. His mom was very proud of him.
I want to give a shout-out to my mom, too, because the first thing yesterday, we sat down. I saw her. She came to my hotel with everyone. We sat down. She goes, "Rob, I'm so proud of you when you score your 69th touchdown." So I was like, I got to give her a shout-out now for sure for letting me know that she's super proud of me. So hi, Mom, and thank you.
You got to love Gronk's mama. You got to love the Gronk. He is just too lovable. I don't care what team you root for.
Oh, he is, and she is a proud mama with her 4 boys. But let's be honest here for a second. Brady, as much as I try not to like him, he is just a freak of nature since he's been back this year.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought this was going to happen. Coming off 4-game suspension for something that he honestly, I don't want to say he didn't deserve, but I think a 4-game suspension was a little too much.
It was blown up.
It was very blown up, and to do it a year after that all happened, it was just silly. And you just knew that, he was just sitting in a corner those first 4 weeks, and he was saying, I will lead this team to another Super Bowl. I don't care how much time I'm off for. You got him in fantasy? Great on you. You're probably popping champagne.
Let's move on from Brady. Let's talk about Mike Gillislee. I know he had a great week. I unfortunately could not keep him this week because of all the buys and not knowing whether or not McCoy was going to play. It's iffy till the last minute, and it's a risk.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a risk. I guess it was like the least amount of risk in this category out of any other player, just because was named the starter. I know going up against the Patriots, he didn't have as much opportunity as I guess the Bills would have liked, since they were pretty much trailing the whole game. But he still filled in pretty nicely. He rushed for 85 yards, got a touchdown, and he only did it on 12 carries. And if you got a little PPR action going, he had additional 3 catches for 9 yards as well. So it was a nice fill-in start for McCoy. I'm guessing McCoy will be back after this week, so nice little spot start if you had him. So hopefully the Bills will use him as more of as a backup moving forward. We'll see what happens with that. Quincy Enunwa I have a funny little story. On Sunday morning, I had somebody that needed another wide receiver since Ty Montgomery was out. He was in his lineup, and he had nobody else. So to the waiver wire we went, and I just want to mention that this was an 8-team league. I've never dealt with an 8-team league before, but it was interesting to see who was out there. And we kind of had to scroll down a little bit, but I saw Quincy Enunwa's name. And I was with a friend, and I kind of looked at him, and I was like, hey, I think this might be a nice little ad for this guy. I think we should help him out here. So this is this guy's first year of playing fantasy football, and he had no idea who he was dealing with here. So I was like, listen, you get Enunwa here, you start him. He's going to have a nice little game. And a nice little game he did indeed have.
And everything will just fall into place.
Exactly. He had 4 catches on 11 targets, 93 yards, and a touchdown. So nice little start if you had him. I always advocated that he was a nice flex play, especially with Eric Decker now out for the season.
Yep.
And going against the Cleveland Browns, that's just a no-brainer to me.
No, I agree with you. I was going to say the same thing. It's a no-brainer going against the Browns. And, I mean, the Jets really didn't look great in the first half, but they really turned it around in the second half. They were a completely different team.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick kind of was like, oh, yeah, I got benched a couple of weeks ago. I have to play well again. And
maybe I should fight for my spot a little bit.
Yeah, and they got away with the win. So good for the Jets. Good for Enunwa. Happy to see him produce. Let's go to another guy, similar situation, John Brown. Caught his first touchdown of the year. Had a nice little game, especially in both leagues. I believe in standard and PPR, he had a double-digit points. So if you had Brown, you were kind of relieved and excited that he got that score. Even with Palmer kind of having another off day, I wouldn't go around dropping him just yet, but I definitely consider benching him moving forward over a lot of other quarterbacks. So it's been a tough year on quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's been an unpredictable and tough year on quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Like on good quarterbacks, it's been very odd. I've been very disappointed.
No, for sure. I totally agree. And let's go to a guy that was seeing his first action on the field in over a month, and that was wide receiver Donte Moncrief of the Colts. He had that shoulder injury he was battling and was targeted heavily once T.Y. Hilton himself went down with a hamstring injury. He had a touchdown. He had over 40 yards. So, again, if you had him, you were kind of excited because he was on your bench for a while, and I felt like you had to start him in a flex or even your third wide receiver spot. So definitely produced, and if Hilton misses more time, this guy could be one of the top plays overall in fantasy. So you're pretty much excited to have him back, and more so that he's going to produce more. And also, before we move on, I know we usually tape on Monday night here, but
just finished watching this one.
Yeah, the Monday night game just wrapped up. Bears won 20-10, and it was much due to a guy that nobody, I don't think, really predicted. I kind of held on hope on this guy. Didn't want to start him this week because of the situation. But Jordan Howard, man, did he look dominant. I mean, he tore up the Vikings defense by himself. Now, it is fair to mention that Jay Cutler came back in this game, and again, everyone kind of had their doubts on the Bears. But you know what? He had faith in this rookie running back, and he pounded the ball with him. He had over 200 yards from scrimmage. He had over 150 yards rushing. He had so the total amount of yards he had in this game was 202 yards. It was the most yards from a Bears running back before the age of 22 in the team's history. So a performance like this is reasons why you don't lose faith in a rookie running back. This guy, he's trying to figure out the league, but he's got that spark. Okay, this is what puts everyone else aside, especially veterans that are comfortable. They have nice contracts. This guy is fighting for a spot. There was 2 running backs, Kadeem Carey and Jeremy Langford, who thought they were going to be in this game. They were barely a factor. And now, with Howard having a game like this, there's no way that they're going with anybody else, in my eyes. They're going to rely on this guy, especially with Cutler in this lineup. He's going to look to him. He was a safety blanket. So essentially what I'm trying to say is Howard is a must start. And I still believe he will be a league winner because he has a cake matchup weeks 14 to 16. So if you still held on to him, you didn't drop him, kudos to you. He is now startable for the rest of the season. I don't care what the situation is moving forward.
And moving along to our deep cuts group, where a wide receiver in Arizona is getting high praise from head coach Bruce Arians. John, who are we talking about?
That would be wide receiver J.J. Nelson. He had a pretty big day for the Cardinals. Now, it is fair to mention, like I was saying earlier with John Brown, a lot of these guys got this in garbage time. J.J. Nelson, 8 of 12 targets. He had 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, listen, garbage time or not, 2 touchdowns is 2 touchdowns. It's an excellent day. I believe he had a top 25 finish overall in fantasy this week. He's going to be an interesting guy to look for because Arians said that he's now going to be the starter over Michael Floyd, who's struggled mightily. He just hasn't lived up to expectation, and now this guy Nelson emerging, he's going to get his shot. So we'll see how long that lasts, and he might be mentioned in our little waiver wire preview. But we also have a couple of running backs to get to as well, and I'll just start off with Capri Bibbs. He was a guy that I first started off last week in my cold cuts list. But then once C.J. Anderson was announced that he was out for the year, or at least the fantasy season, Bibbs became the backup to Devontae Booker. So naturally, you put him up to the deep cuts, and he got involved a bit, rushed for as a couple of yards here and there. Booker got the majority of the carries. He did get a little banged up, but he came back in the game and he scored a touchdown. So again, if you want to add Bibbs, if you have the roster space for him, he's a great bench guy. Similar situation could happen to Booker. You never know. As insurance, he's a nice little add. We can also talk about Peyton Barber and Anton Smith, the running backs out of Tampa Bay. Now, my guy Jaquiz Rodgers got a bit banged up
He did.
in this game against the Raiders. Disappointing to say the least, and it looks like he's not going to play. He was spotted in a walking boot on Monday.
No.
During practice, yes. Oh, yes, he was. And according to their head coach, Dirk Coder, he said that both Anton Smith and Peyton Barber are likely to split carries. So it's going to be difficult to kind of gauge to see who's going to have a better game. I guess you have to monitor practice, see who's going where. But if I were to guess, Anton Smith might be the starter and may have a better game, only because he's going to face his former team in the Falcons. And with situations like that, you want to try to get a little extra fire under their butts. Similar situation like Chris Hogan wanted to have a good game against his former team, trashed him for 97 yards and a score. So similar situation might happen with Anton Smith. Not 100% sure on that just yet, but if I were to gamble, I think I would take my chances on Smith more than I would Peyton Barber. And also, let's mention C.J. Procease. He was the backup to Kristen Michael and wasn't involved too much. Had a couple of catches, kind of saved the day if you start him in a flex in a PPR league. But as of now, Michael's kind of the guy in the backfield. He gets the majority of the carries and the targets in the backfield. So again, it's just a more speculative ad, or deep cut, if you will. If you want to add him just for insurance, that's certainly okay. Thomas Rawls is not going to be in the lineup next week, so he's going to be their backup once again, and we'll see. He might be a little more involved. We just don't know that just yet.
And finally, is there anybody that we want to mention in cold cuts?
We could briefly mention one guy, Tyreek Hill. Had himself a nice little game for the Chiefs. Caught 5 of 6 targets for 98 yards and a score. Again, if you're in a deeper league, you might want to look at him in a 14 or 16 team league, but there's not really a guarantee that he's going to put up performances week to week like this, so might be better off just leaving him on the waiver. Andrew Hawkins for the Browns had himself a 2-touchdown game. If somebody somehow started him, you either had insider information or you had him directly from the source of Andrew Hawkins' mouth to start him. So Terrell Pryor Sr. is still their guy. He also had a nice game. Obviously, he's been a stud for the Browns. It's kind of ironic to say that, but kind of just stay away from Hawkins. He's more of just a bench guy. Not even. Danny Amendola for the Patriots had a touchdown. Just, again, can't trust that guy in an offense that has so many weapons. He'll have up and down games for sure, more down than up. And finally, I want to mention more of like a fantasy, like oasis or a magician, if you will. Wide receiver Jeff Janis got a little bit involved in this game with injuries to Ty Montgomery and Randall Cobb. Not sure if that's going to keep up as those guys return from their injuries. So there's so many options you can have in that wide receiver core. So I don't really see much play from Janis unless either of those guys is out for an extended period of time. Still leave him out there. I don't know if he's an ad just yet, but maybe keep an eye on him just to see. If you're in a keeper league and you're allowed to pick up somebody off the free agency wire and you want to take a chance on Janis for next year, you can do that. But other than that, I think I would just leave him out there.
So to sum up this new system of ours, do you think it's more accurate, John? Did it work?
I think it proves that anyone is startable in your lineup. You can literally throw Tyreek Hill in your lineup, and he had a game. So essentially, like, mine is more risk-oriented than it is according to projected points and projected players' impact on a game. I don't know if Yahoo has some sort of algorithm or something to get those projections up there, but it's just simply not 100% accurate. I think with these rankings, it's a little more accurate as to how risky somebody could be started, but they're just basically saying some guys aren't startable in leagues, and you can't really outright say that because there could be guys that have a pop-up game and they say, oh, you don't start him, it's just a one-game thing, and then all of a sudden he's getting more and more involved. Like Kendall Wright is a perfect example. They were saying that about Kendall Wright. And now look at him. He's now going to be the number one receiver in that offense. So I think everyone's in play. It's just a matter of risk you take with starting somebody. So you just got to look at the situation they're going up against, the offensive playbook going into the game for that team.
Yep.
And the situation. Are they facing a tough defense or a team that's going to put up a lot of points? If so, then maybe you don't want to play a running back from the opposite team. You want to play more of a wide receiver. So it's all lucky. It's all chance.
A lot goes into it. You just gotta read the matchups.
Yeah, I don't want to say all luck, but a lot of it has to do with luck. So if you get lucky, good for you. If you don't, that's the purpose of this game. It's all on chance. So why not create a system that is based off that?
And if you had Julian Edelman this week, then good for you. You deserved it. The Dopes Ranker has spoken, and that will do it for our first recap with our Dopes rankings. We'll unveil our weekly waiver wire picks after this quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Want to know which fringe players you should start or sit in your fantasy leagues? Want up-to-the-minute news and analysis from the beat reporters around the league? Follow @FantasyDopes on Twitter to get your fix and fill the void of having to worry about which player will feast or famine.
And welcome back, Dope Heads. Now is the time in our portion of the podcast to give out some of our weekly waiver wire pickups. John, we'll start with you.
Alrighty, so number one, we didn't talk about this guy. I wanted to talk about him specifically here, is Saints running back Tim Hightower. He got in after Mark Ingram fumbled the ball early against the Seahawks. And I guess his leash was pretty short since that they pretty much didn't use him after Hightower came into this game. And he finished with over 100 yards on 26 carries. And after the game, head coach Sean Payton said he earned more playing time with that performance. So this could really turn into a full-blown committee backfield. And you know what? Ingram could probably have a nice little bounce-back game. I don't know if it was just a kind of a reality check for him. But you know how this Saints offense operates. Everyone has a chance to just eat. And you know what? Hightower might be in there, and he might get his looks and become like a C.J. Spiller, Mark Ingram type of backfield like they were a couple of years ago. So I think he's a great add in your team right now if you need a running back. And if you want to spend around $25, $28 on him, you should be able to get him in your league. Number two, I have Rob Kelly, the running back in Washington. We kind of said this before. He was a starter, and he pretty much earned it. He's not as flashy as a runner as some other guys in the NFL, but he got the bulk of the work, and he had plenty of opportunities to carry the ball. Now, he does have a bye week next week. They face the Vikings, who I guess now don't have a good defense. I mean, they lost to the Bears. I don't know what the hell's going on. There's no parity in the NFL. What's going on with that? But if Matt Jones continues to sit, Kelly will still see the bulk of those carries, and you never know. He could have a nice little game, a touchdown. That'll save his fantasy day. So he's a nice little add now. If you want to get him for about $22, you should be good there. Number three on the list, I have Dion Lewis, Patriots running back. He is on PUP still, but he is going to start practicing as they're approaching their bye week this week. If all goes well in practice, there's a chance they may activate him at home against the Seahawks, which is another tough game. But he's not going to be their between the tackles running back, their power running back. That's LeGarrette Blount's work. If you want to sit Blount, that might be a terrible option. But James White's value is going to go out the door once Dion Lewis comes back into this lineup. And he actually might have a lot of value in that game, catching a lot of balls out of the backfield. So we'll see what happens. There's still a bit of time, but if you want to spend about $18 on him, you should be able to get him. And you got to roster him for another week until you can possibly use him to come back from injury. But I like him in that situation. Patriots obviously really like him, so I think that would be a smart add. Number 4, I have both Anton Smith and Peyton Barber. We touched up on this earlier. Not really sure who to start, who to sit on that situation. Sounds like they're pretty much going to split carries. But if I were to guess, like I said earlier, Anton Smith might be the beneficiary of these two backs. He's facing his older team. I think he might want a little revenge on them. He might find the end zone. We'll see how that plays out Thursday night. And at number 5, I got C.J. Procease. There's all running backs that I've mentioned. Tim Hightower, Rob Kelly, Dion Lewis, Anton Smith, Peyton Barber, C.J. Procease. With the news, like I said, that Thomas Rawls isn't going to be back next week, Procease might be a valuable pass-catching back. He may not see as much time as Chris Thompson, but he's worthy of a stash for now. If Michael gets injured, then you could certainly slot him in as a starter. And there you go. So how about you, Jillian? Who do you got for your top 5?
Well, at number 1, I've got Jarkandrick West. And with Jamal Charles out and Spencer Ware leaving the game with a concussion, he's a great pickup because, well, he's one of the only options that they have left. And at number 2, I've got Kenneth Dixon. Now, Jim Harbaugh came right out and said that he wanted to get Dixon more involved before the bye week. So at the very least, I'd consider putting him on the bench if you've got some room. At number 3, I've got J.J. Nelson. Well, he's now a starting wide receiver for the Cardinals over Michael Floyd. Need I say more? Hopefully, after how the end of that Cardinals game went, Carson Palmer can stay connected with J.J. Nelson and his wide receivers. And at number 4, I've got Teron Ward. Now, Tevin Coleman is suffering from a hamstring injury, and it looks like the Falcons plan to go to Ward a lot behind Devontae Freeman. And at number 5, I've got Ladarius Green. Now, there's a good chance that Green sees his first target of the week coming back from that ankle injury. Although he still may be an iffy start for the week, I'd at the very least put him on your bench so that you can play him in week 10.
Yeah, I think those are all great options. I especially like the J.J. Nelson, the Charkandrick West aspect of it. It's nice to get a mix and variety of different waiver wire targets. So we definitely did a great job of kind of separating that. I kind of focused on the running backs. You brought up an excellent running back with Spencer Ware possibly not coming back in. And we'll see what happens with Ladarius Green. I'm interested to see if he gets any play.
And John, as Halloween night ends, it looks like our time here has also come to an end. We're finished with this holiday-themed edition of the Fantasy Dopes podcast. And as always, give us a follow on Twitter and SoundCloud at Fantasy Dopes, or visit www.fantasydopes.com for the latest on rankings and wire pickups. Or do both. We might toss in some articles there, so stay tuned for that as well. And if you like our product, don't be afraid to hit that donate button and help us improve. You cheapskates. Any final words, John, for the people as Halloween ends?
I just want to say to everybody, I hope they enjoyed their Halloween. Hopefully you had lots of candy and you're almost slipping into a sugar coma. I kid. And just to let everyone know, we're going to have another podcast out for the people, I believe on Thursday morning. It should be out there for you to enjoy. That'll be our next Dopes Rankings podcast. We're going to continue marching on with that. We like our little system we got going, so we're going to try to keep it going and keep it fresh and hopefully give the best advice to the best of our abilities. Jillian, what do you have for us?
I was just going to say, I hope that, our father figure is back to join us and that he has some news to share with us about a new bundle of joy in his life. So fingers crossed for that.
And I'll be running my mouth about Jordan Howard pretty much the whole podcast. So stay tuned for that one. It's going to be great.
On that note, happy Halloween, everyone.